Hello there, David Belman, one of the founders of the Young Guns Movement, and I'm joined here today by a very special guest, Tim Stewart, and you have a title change that's coming up, President and Managing Partner of DeWitt Law Firm, so welcome.
Indeed, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today, and we're going to talk a little bit more about ESOPs, and we've had a whole series, and this one is the stuff that we might have missed. And so we're going to cover a bunch of loose ends.
Amazing, we might have missed something. It sounds like we did.
Well, we're going to catch it here, hopefully, and answer all your questions about ESOPs. So in previous episodes, we kind of talked a little bit about some of the industries that are good candidates for ESOPs. And you mentioned one that's close to my heart, the construction industry. Mm-hmm. And one of the things about the construction industry that's really interesting is that it's typically a family-owned type of industry. So how does an ESOP work? And what if, with a family situation, and what if the family still wants to be kind of part of that ESOP?
Yeah. So that is very common for family-owned businesses to transition to ESOP. And so that could mean a full transition, 100% of the stock goes into the ESOP, or partial, meaning family wants to retain even a majority percentage. So you can do whatever percentage of the company, you can sell whatever percentage you want to the ESOP. But on top of that, even if you sold 100%, we have many clients who have sold 100%, so the family no longer actually owns the stock, but yet they continue to run the company as executives, as part of the management team.
So they could still be a CEO, but they don't actually own the company.
Right.
Or you could have the situation the reverse where maybe, let's say I had a sister or something and she still wants to be part owner, but she really doesn't want to make the decisions on the day-to-day basis.
Correct. I would say not only is that possible, it's actually common.
Okay. So that's a fairly common thing, and it would not be an issue to have a family business and turn it into an ESOP.
No, it's also very common.
Okay. So the next question that kind of I have about ESOPs is with regards to actual business structure. And you have LLCs and SCorps and different things like that. Does that matter when you're looking at an ESOP? Do you have to have a certain type of corporation, or do they have to be changed in order to convert?
So generally the answer is you have to be a corporation. You actually could be an SCorp or a SCorp. Technically, there was an IRS ruling that says LLCs could do ESOPs, but there generally isn't a good reason to stay an LLC once you do an ESOP. You might as well become an SCorp or a SCorp. The tax consequences can be mirrored for an LLC. That makes sense. But most importantly, if you want to, as we've discussed in previous episodes, 100% ESOP-owned S corporations pay no taxes on profits.
That's fantastic.
And so
benefit.
That's where you definitely want to be an S corp. I should say pay no federal taxes, and in most states, including Wisconsin, no state taxes on income.
And of course, if you did have an LLC, you could always convert it 1 year to a S corp and then switch over.
You would stay. You would usually stay. And there's really once you're an LLC, most of the time the LLC tax consequences are similar, if not identical, to being an S corp. So usually in that situation, it happens all the time, we have LLCs converting to an S corporation at the time of the transaction, and then they just stay as S corporations.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes perfect sense. So let's say you're a business owner and this is something that you're interested in. Is there anything that they can do ahead of time to just kind of get ready for this? Is there things that they can do to prepare to make that transition?
Very good question. And I would say, and there's lots of people in books that have been written about this too.
You need to write a book about this, by the way,
maybe.
With what you know.
Maybe, except I'm not an expert on all this, but I will say the financial picture of your company, in particular your balance sheet and those sorts of annual items that you P&L statements. A lot of times companies pre-ESOP have been a little informal about some of those things. There are things you can do that are essentially upgrading your financial statements. You can do reviewed financial statements, and above that is called audited financial statements. There is an expense associated with both of those things, and your CPAs can tell you about those. But generally speaking, if you can go and convert to start doing at least reviewed financial statements, that not only will that help you in an ESOP transaction, it would actually help you in whatever sort of succession plan you decide to do. So I'd say getting your books in order, and that's a good way to do it.
That makes a lot of sense, and I'm assuming that you probably need a little bit more level of transparency with regard to your financials when you have an ESOP, just because the employees are going to care about that. Is that
well, and a buyer, and so in an ESOP case, the ESOP trustee functions as the buyer, but just like if you were going to go buy a business, you'd want to have a pretty crystal clear view of their finances.
That makes a ton of sense. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's take it from the opposite perspective. Now we kind of talked about prepping for an owner. Let's talk about from the employee's perspective for a second. Let's say you're an employee in an ESOP and you've got some shares now or ownership and you quit. What happens?
Yeah, so the whatever shares, there's a vesting schedule in an ESOP, just like with a 401k plan. And so whatever shares, and that's usually like about a 6-year vesting schedule, whatever shares that you're vested in, those are yours, and the company will buy those back from you. So you will walk away with cash, right? You don't walk away with the shares, generally speaking. So, but the company does have time to do that. You can imagine if a whole bunch of people left at once,
absolutely,
it could be a cash crunch for the company to have to buy all those back. So the IRS, or the Internal Revenue Code, allows the company to buy those out over a 5-year period.
Okay.
And if you leave before you retire, if you're an employee and you leave before you retire, the company can actually wait up to 5 years before they start paying you, before they start buying those shares back from you. In the meantime, though, those shares are still sitting for you, and so if the company appreciates in value during that time, so do your shares.
So you still get to keep the gains. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if someone does quit, do they have to divest those shares, or can they hang on to them?
It's up to the company. Generally speaking, most ESOP companies do not want former employees walking around as shareholders,
especially if you go to a competitor or something, right?
Right.
Okay.
And also they're no longer really contributing to your bottom line. Not to say that you didn't while you were there, but it's generally speaking, these ESOP companies, they want people in the boat to own the shares, meaning the people who are there.
That's the main point of it.
But again, there's a lot of factors, including cash flow, that dictate, well, how quickly are we going to buy those shares back from people?
Sure. That makes a ton of sense. So I'm glad I got some more clarification from you on that
questions.
one. So what's one of the common mistakes that a company will make when they're transitioning to an ESOP?
So I think we talked about this a little bit in a prior episode, but I think a lot of companies will view an ESOP as a panacea for everything that's wrong with their company. It is really important at the front end, and I'm saying in the first couple months of an ESOP, to go to employees and really explain to them what it is. On top of that, in most ESOP transactions, including and especially 100% transactions, what happens is the company has to borrow money either from a bank and or from the seller, him or herself, right? Because the ESOP doesn't have its own money to pay. We've talked about this in other episodes. And so you have a leveraged company at that point starting out on its ESOP journey, which means the value of the stock is going to start low.
Okay.
And so employees, when you're rolling it out, you say, oh, this is great, you're employee owners, you get the benefit of the stock, and then they get the first statement and it's pennies per, on the dollar for stock price.
Okay.
So you got to prepare them for that and make sure they understand it is going to increase pretty quickly, especially as the company repays that debt over the first, say, 5 years. But you don't want people to think, oh, this is great, and then they get a statement, they're disappointed.
Yeah, I got something that was worthless. But
right.
It's really not. It's just starting. It's in infancy and it's growing.
And it goes back again to the people that you have working with you to roll it out, making sure the rollout and the messaging is super important there.
Absolutely. Well, this has been really enlightening, and the messaging from you has been spot on, so I appreciate all the advice. And if you are a business owner and you're considering doing an ESOP, this is the gentleman you want to talk to right here, Tim Stewart from DeWitt Law Firm. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay.